The galaxy knew many species. Some were ancient and wise, others were young and vibrant. Some built empires of light and reason, others carved dominions through fear and fire. And then, there was Earth. Or rather, humanity, scattered across a handful of fragile colonies, a minor footnote in the Grand Galactic Union. They were known, if they were known at all, for their unpredictable emotions, their messy history, their art, and their occasional, inconvenient bursts of chaotic energy. They were never taken seriously. They were a curiosity, a resource, a place to dump excess goods or conduct risky experiments far from civilized space. They warned, they petitioned, they spoke of balance and interconnectedness. The Union, vast and complacent in its ancient power, simply laughed. The laughter echoed across star systems, carried on the subspace channels of a million-member species who had long since settled into comfortable, predictable existences. The Union had rules, protocols, a vast, ossified bureaucracy that ensured stability. It also ensured stagnation. And in that stagnation, it bred a casual cruelty towards those outside its inner circle, those who didn't fit the mold of quiet compliance and predictable behavior. Humanity, with its stubborn insistence on self-determination and its refusal to fully integrate into the Union's rigid hierarchy, was a persistent irritant. Warnings came from human scientists who saw the encroaching exploitation of border systems. From human diplomats who pleaded for restraint. From human strategists who, with chilling foresight, mapped the Union's blind spots and vulnerabilities, not as a threat, but as a cautionary analysis. These warnings were filed, ignored, or met with patronizing reassurances. The Union had fleets that could glass worlds, technology that had governed the stars for millennia, a history of crushing dissent and absorbing weaker species. What could these emotional, short-lived creatures truly understand about power? They understood pain. They understood loss. These lessons were delivered with brutal efficiency by the Union's Third Expansion Fleet, under the command of High Elder Valerius, a being of immense age and utterly devoid of empathy. The target was Cygnus X-12, a thriving human colony world, rich in untapped resources and inconveniently located along a planned Union expansion route. There was no declaration of war, no ultimatum. There was only the sudden, terrifying appearance of a Union battle group in orbit. The colony world, vibrant with life and hope, had no planetary defenses to speak of, only a handful of system patrol craft. They broadcast frantic pleas, appeals to Union law, to decency, to the shared principles the Union supposedly upheld. The pleas were answered with orbital bombardment. Not the quick, merciful kind. This was systematic, prolonged. Cities were razed, oceans boiled, continents scarred. It was a message. A lesson. An act of calculated terror designed to break the spirit, to remind humanity of its place. Survivors broadcasting from underground shelters begged for rescue, for intervention. The Union fleet jammed all outgoing transmissions. The galaxy went silent, or turned away. But the silence was incomplete. A single, battered freighter, the Stardust Drifter, had been outbound from the system on a deep space trading run. Its crew, a family of 5 and their android helper, watched from the icy void as their home world burned. They saw the Union ships execute orbital patterns, heard distorted snippets of the colony's dying screams through their long-range sensors before the jamming became absolute. They were too small, too far away, too insignificant to be noticed. They drifted, silent witnesses to the atrocity, the images seared into their minds, the screams echoing in the cold vacuum. They did not send a distress signal. They sent a record. A raw, unfiltered data packet containing everything their sensors and comms had picked up. They sent it home. They sent it to Earth. The record arrived not as a message of defeat, but as a searing brand. It wasn't just data, it was the sound of children crying as their homes vaporized, the sight of blue oceans turning to steam, the cold, indifferent geometry of Union battleships unleashing hell. It landed on screens across Earth and its remaining colonies like a physical blow. Disbelief turned to horror, horror to grief, and grief, cold and deep, curdled into a unifying, absolute rage. Political divisions, national borders that had seemed so important moments before, dissolved. Economic disparities became meaningless. Every human on every world, on every ship, felt the same crushing weight of loss, the same burning core of injustice. They looked at the raw data, they listened to the dying voices, and a single, silent promise solidified in billions of hearts. Never again. Never again would they be weak. Never again would they be victims. Never again would the galaxy laugh. The United Earth Directorate, a sprawling, often fractious global government, underwent a swift, brutal transformation. Committees were disbanded, debates silenced. A Directorate of Survival and Retribution was formed, headed by individuals who had lost everything in the Cygnus X-12 atrocity, their faces etched with a permanent, cold resolve. Admiral Anara Sharma, who had lost her entire family on the colony, was placed in command of all military and strategic operations. Her orders were simple, absolute: prepare. Earth and its remaining colonies went dark. They withdrew from galactic trade routes, severed diplomatic ties with Union members who had offered platitudes but no aid, and shut down most external communications. The galaxy interpreted this as collapse. Humanity, they assumed, had broken. They were grieving, shattered, perhaps even dying out in their isolated corner of space. The Union issued a brief statement regretting the unfortunate incident at Cygnus X-12, blaming it on local system instability, and moved on. Life in the Union returned to its predictable hum. But behind the veil of silence, humanity was not grieving in despair. They were grieving with purpose. Their grief was a forge, their rage the fuel. The societal structure was entirely reoriented. Production lines that had built consumer goods now churned out warships and weaponry on an unprecedented scale. Research facilities, once focused on theoretical physics and terraforming, were repurposed for military applications, delving into forbidden technologies whispered about in ancient texts and the dark corners of scientific inquiry. They opened the Black Vaults, repositories of dangerous, reality-bending research deemed too risky, too unstable, too human for polite galactic society. Scientists worked around the clock, driven by the ghosts of Cygnus X-12. Engineers designed engines that folded space in ways the Union deemed impossible. Shipwrights built hulls not just of steel and composites, but woven with exotic matter and shielded by fields that shrugged off conventional energy weapons. They didn't just build ships, they built instruments of retribution. And deep within Earth's core, powered by captive stars and harnessing energies that frayed the fabric of reality, they began work on something else. Something terrible. Something named Nemesis. Decades passed. The time skip was not just temporal, it was transformative. A generation grew up knowing only the silent vow, the constant preparation, the face of Admiral Sharma, aged but unyielding. They learned war not just as a tactic, but as a state of being. They were tempered in the fires of collective trauma, unified by a shared memory and a singular goal. The child who had watched Cygnus burn from the freighter's viewport was now a fleet captain, her eyes holding the same cold fire as the admiral's. The galaxy largely forgot Earth. It was a dead system, a cautionary tale of those who couldn't keep up, who didn't understand the rules. The Union thrived, expanding its borders, absorbing more compliant species, congratulating itself on its stability and wisdom. High Elder Valerius was celebrated as a visionary. Then, the silence ended. It didn't end with a diplomatic hail, a warning, or a declaration. It ended with disappearance. A Union patrol fleet, cruising through a sector considered utterly safe, winked out of existence. No distress signal, no energy flare, nothing. Just gone. The Union shrugged. A sensor glitch, perhaps. Or pirates, though pirates capable of destroying an entire patrol fleet without a trace were unheard of. Then it happened again. And again. Systems on the fringe of Union space, systems that had once bordered human territory, simply ceased reporting. Initial complacency turned to confusion, then to unease. Probes were sent. They found nothing but empty space where fleets had been, where stations had orbited. Sometimes, they found wreckage, strange and horrifying. Hulls that looked as if they had been unmade atom by atom, shields that had simply collapsed inward. The first decisive strike targeted the Valerius shipyards, the orbital facility where the third expansion fleet had been built. It was considered impregnable, protected by layered defenses, thousands of ships, and proximity to the Union core worlds. There were no warnings. One moment, the shipyards pulsed with light and activity. The next, a ripple, unseen on conventional sensors, passed through the system. Defense platforms crumpled as if made of paper. Capital ships twisted and tore themselves apart from within. The thousands of vessels and structures in the shipyards became a cloud of fine, dispersed dust, the result of matter conversion on a scale previously only hypothesized in theoretical physics journals that the Union deemed fantasy. Union command stations screamed queries into the void. Who is attacking us? Identify yourselves. The only response came moments later, a single, cold, female voice broadcast on all frequencies, overlaid onto a visual feed of the Valerius system where dust motes glittered in the stellar wind. It was Admiral Sharma. Her face, projected onto screens across the Union, was expressionless, ancient in its sorrow and terrifying in its resolve. "We are Earth," she said, her voice calm, measured, yet resonating with an power that chilled to the bone. "You forgot us. We remembered." The galaxy didn't laugh this time. It froze. Then, it panicked. The sheer scale of the destruction, the impossible efficiency, the silence of the attack, it shattered the Union's arrogance. Their ancient defenses, designed to counter energy weapons, plasma cannons, kinetics, were useless against forces that seemed to manipulate the very fabric of spacetime. Their vast fleets, built for grand-scale engagements, found themselves unable to target enemies that moved with blinding speed or appeared and disappeared at will. The human fleet, which the Union had assumed non-existent or primitive, numbered in the thousands. Their ships weren't built for comfort or prestige, but for a single, brutal purpose. They were dark, angular, devoid of unnecessary ornamentation. Their primary weapons didn't rely on conventional energy, they manipulated fundamental forces, twisting gravity, collapsing quantum states, dissolving targets into their constituent particles. Their shields weren't just energy barriers, they were localized reality distortions, flickering mockeries of physics. And their speed was terrifying. They didn't use warp gates or hyperlanes like the Union. They simply went, tearing brief, unstable tunnels through spacetime, arriving at their destination before their departure point even registered their absence. This was the dawn of the Retribution campaign. It was not a war of conquest, but a systematic dismantling. The human fleet didn't occupy worlds, they rendered strategic targets incapable of supporting the Union. They targeted supply lines, communication relays, command centers. They moved with the precision of a surgeon and the finality of death. Planets that had housed key Union administrative hubs received chilling broadcasts. Footage from the Stardust Drifter, enhanced and stabilized, played on every public screen, every channel. The burning world of Cygnus X-12, the indifferent Union ships, the sound of dying screams. A cold voice, sometimes Admiral Sharma's, sometimes another equally emotionless voice, narrated. "This is what you did. This is who you are. Do you remember?" Psychological warfare was a key weapon. The Union relied on stability and control. Humanity introduced chaos and doubt. They didn't just destroy fleets, they erased them. Rumors spread like wildfire across Union space, of ships that vanished without a trace, of entire stations found empty, their crews simply gone, leaving behind untouched meals and humming machinery. The uncertainty was crippling. Where would they strike next? What could possibly stop them? Union admirals, trained in millennia of conventional warfare, were helpless. Their tactics were obsolete. Their overwhelming numbers were meaningless when they couldn't bring their weapons to bear. They sent their mightiest dreadnoughts, their most decorated fleets. The human response was swift, silent, and absolute. A flicker of light, a distortion in the void, and a dreadnought the size of a small moon would simply cease to exist, leaving behind only vacuum and a haunting absence. Admiral Kalen of the Union's 7th Fleet, a veteran of countless campaigns against lesser species, watched in horror as half his fleet dissolved in the blink of an eye. There was no enemy visible, no incoming fire, nothing his sensors could detect. His bridge crew screamed, pointing at readouts that showed impossible energy fluctuations, reality collapsing around their allies. Report. What is happening? Kalen bellowed, his ancient voice cracking with fear. A young officer, his face pale and slick with sweat, stammered, "Admiral, there's nothing. They're just unraveling. The signatures. They match the Valerius event. It's them. The humans." The name, once a subject of derision, was now spoken with a tremor of primal terror. The humans. The emotional apes. The ones who were supposed to have withered and died. Kalen issued the order to retreat, a word he hadn't spoken in centuries. But it was too late. Another distortion rippled across the bridge view screen. The lights flickered, the deck buckled, and the screams of his crew were abruptly cut short as the flagship, too, began to unravel, consumed by forces it could not comprehend. The systematic dismantling continued. Core worlds, once untouchable centers of Union power, were targeted. Not with planetary bombardment, that would be too quick, too merciful. Instead, their orbital defenses were annihilated with chilling precision. Their planetary shields were bypassed or simply dissolved. Then, the human ships would hold orbit, silent and menacing, broadcasting the Cygnus X-12 footage, leaving the populations below to contemplate their fate, their helplessness, their rulers' catastrophic miscalculation. Union leadership descended into panic and infighting. Accusations flew. Traitors were purged. Desperate measures were proposed. They remembered whispers of ancient artifacts, of forbidden superweapons locked away since the early days of the Union, deemed too dangerous, too unpredictable. Now, in their desperation, they began to open their own black vaults. High Elder Theron, one of the few remaining members of the ruling council, authorized the activation of the Worldbreaker Array, a network of reality-destabilizing satellites capable of rendering a star system uninhabitable. It had never been tested, deemed too risky even for existential threats. But the humans were an existential threat. The Worldbreaker Array powered up in the galactic core, its activation signatures blindingly bright. Union comms broadcast the event, a desperate attempt to show strength, to warn the humans away. The human fleet responded not with terror, but with a chilling efficiency. Before the Worldbreaker could fully engage, a small human strike group, just a handful of ships that moved like ghosts, appeared within the array itself. They didn't fire weapons. They attached devices, small, dark nodes that pulsed with contained energy. The Worldbreaker Array, meant to tear systems apart, began to feed on itself. The reality distortions became localized, contained within the array's own structure. The blinding energy signatures twisted inward. With a silent, agonizing scream of tearing spacetime, the array collapsed into a singularity, a controlled implosion that vanished milliseconds later, leaving only a pocket of utterly empty, sterile vacuum where the most powerful weapon in the Union's arsenal had just been. The human ships that had placed the nodes were gone before the collapse was complete, leaving no trace. Admiral Sharma's voice returned to the Union frequencies. "You play with forces you do not understand," she stated flatly. "We understand them intimately. We built them from our pain." The galaxy watched, stunned and terrified, as the Union, the ancient, unassailable power, crumbled. Fleets evaporated. Defenses failed. Worlds that had sheltered under Union protection for millennia found themselves exposed, vulnerable, facing a silent, implacable enemy that seemed to wield the very laws of the universe as weapons. Internal dissent within the Union erupted into open civil war in several sectors. Species who had long resented Union rule, inspired by humanity's impossible success, rose in rebellion. The Union leadership, holed up in their fortified capital system, found their authority evaporating faster than their fleets. The human fleet approached the Union capital, a system bristling with hundreds of thousands of ships, layered defenses, and the collective might of millennia of rule. This was the heart of the beast. This was where Cygnus X-12 had been ordered. The Union defenders braced for the final, apocalyptic battle. They expected a wave of destructive power, a brutal assault. The human fleet stopped at the system's edge. They didn't engage. They simply waited, their dark hulls silent against the starfield. Then, they opened a channel. Not a galaxy-wide broadcast this time. A direct, encrypted link to the Union High Command, to High Elder Theron. Admiral Sharma's face appeared on his screen, alongside the faces of other human leaders, scientists, military commanders, even the child who had watched Cygnus burn, now grown and standing stoically behind her. "You destroyed our world," Sharma stated, her eyes holding no warmth, no pity. "You murdered our people. You thought we would break. You thought we would disappear." Theron, his face gaunt with fear and exhaustion, managed to croak, "What do you want? We will pay. We will give you systems, wealth. Anything." Sharma's lips curved in a fleeting, terrible expression that might have been a smile, or a grimace of pain. "You have nothing we want. Nothing you possess has value to us anymore." She gestured, and the screen behind her showed images. Not of Cygnus X-12, but of something far larger. Gigantic energy signatures, impossible concentrations of mass, structures that dwarfed anything the Union had ever conceived. "You saw our fleet dismantle yours," Sharma continued, her voice gaining a low, resonant power. "You saw us negate your weapons. You saw us unravel your defenses." The images on the screen shifted, focusing on something deep within Earth's solar system. A vast, dark construct, humming with contained power. "This," Sharma said, her voice now carrying the weight of 1,000,000,000 souls, "is Nemesis. It is built from the sum of our grief, powered by the heart of our rage. With it, we could unravel your entire Union, your history, your very existence. We could turn your core worlds into dust, sterilize your species, erase your name from the stars." Theron stared, paralyzed, at the image of the dark construct. He believed her. Every impossible feat their ships had performed hinted at capabilities far beyond comprehension. "This is not justice," Theron whispered, finding his voice. "This is vengeance. This is madness." Another human on the screen spoke, a younger woman with a scar across her cheek, her gaze distant and cold. "Captain Eva Rostova, the witness from the Stardust Drifter. Justice was denied us," she said simply. "Madness is believing you could do what you did and face no consequence." Admiral Sharma returned her gaze to Theron. "We could end you. Here. Now." The World Breaker was a child's toy compared to this. A long, agonizing silence stretched between the two species. The human fleet remained motionless at the edge of the system, a silent judgment. "But we will not," Sharma finally stated. Theron blinked, hope flickering feebly in his ancient eyes. You show mercy." Sharma's expression hardened. "This is not mercy. This is a demonstration. We have the power to annihilate you, utterly and completely. We choose, at this moment, not to. Your union is broken. Your fleets are dust. Your authority is gone. The galaxy has seen its foundation shaken to rubble by those you scorned." She leaned closer to the screen, her eyes burning with a cold, unwavering light. "The lesson is this: never again will you underestimate us. Never again will you harm us without consequence. We are not gone. We are not broken. We are simply here. And we remember. Always." The transmission ended. The human fleet did not attack. They simply turned and departed, slipping back into the void from which they had come, leaving the Union capital system in a state of shock, its defenses useless, its authority shattered, its people staring into the abyss of their own making. The galaxy reeled. The ancient Union, the dominant power for millennia, was gone. Not conquered, but dismantled, exposed as fragile and arrogant, its core broken by the very species it had dismissed. A new power had risen, terrifying in its capability and chilling in its reserve. Earth. Humanity. The new galactic order was one of profound unease. Species that had been oppressed by the Union cautiously celebrated, but their joy was tempered by fear of the new hegemony. Other potential powers eyed Earth's domain warily, unsure of its intentions. Humanity did not seek to replace the Union's bureaucracy with its own. They didn't establish a new empire in the conventional sense. Instead, they became the silent guardian, the ultimate arbiter of the new peace, a peace enforced by the knowledge of what they were capable of. Their ships patrolled the former Union borders, silent and ever-present. Any flicker of renewed aggression, any attempt by remnants of the Union or opportunistic new factions to replicate the old cruelty, was met with swift, decisive, and often terrifying force. A single human ship appearing in orbit was enough to quell rebellions, deter invasions. The mere threat of their intervention became the new law of the galaxy. But this new dominance carried its own weight. Within the human collective, the unity forged in rage and grief began to show hairline fractures. The sheer scale of their power, the cold ruthlessness of the retribution campaign, the chilling potential of weapons like Nemesis, these raised questions. Admiral Sharma, now the undisputed leader of humanity's galactic presence, faced these questions daily. Captain Rostova, forever marked by the trauma she had witnessed, became a voice for those who believed the campaign had gone far enough, that the line between justice and vengeance had been crossed. Others, hardened by the conflict, argued that the Union remnants, or any potential future aggressor, must be utterly eradicated. A faction emerged advocating for complete galactic dominance, using their power to impose a new, human-centric order. Another argued for total isolation, withdrawing back into their core systems, guarded by impenetrable defenses, leaving the rest of the galaxy to its fate. Sharma, standing on the bridge of the retribution, a vessel forged in the fires of their pain and powered by the echoes of the dead, carried the heaviest burden. She had executed the vengeance. She had led the dismantling. But the silence of the capital world, the fear in Theron's eyes, the conscious decision not to activate Nemesis, these moments haunted her. Had they become what they fought? Had the drive for justice twisted into something darker? "Admiral," said her loyal second-in-command, Commander Harrow, his voice quiet. "Scans confirm the Grell fleet is withdrawing from Sector 4. Your message was received." Sharma nodded, staring out at the starfield. A moment ago, the Grell, an aggressive, expansionist species, had been massing for an invasion of a weaker neighbor, testing the boundaries of the new order. Sharma had broadcast a single image to their command, the empty space where the Valerius shipyards had been. The Grell fleet had immediately dispersed. "They understand," Sharma said, her voice weary. "They understand the consequence." "But do we?" Harrow asked, his gaze meeting hers. He had been with her since before Cygnus, seen the transformation, the hardening. "We wield power now that eclipses everything the Union ever dreamed of. Nemesis sits, silent, waiting. What is our purpose now, Admiral? Are we guardians? Or are we simply the galaxy's new terror?" Sharma didn't answer immediately. The question was the core of the internal conflict, the one that had no easy answer. The cost of their victory was not just the lives lost, the worlds destroyed, but the change within themselves. They had become formidable, terrifying, the architects of a new reality. But the reflection in the mirror was stained with the dust of unraveled fleets and silent worlds. The remnants of the Union huddled in their surviving systems, cowed and broken. Species across the galaxy navigated the new landscape, learning the hard lessons of the old. The lesson taught by Earth was brutal, absolute, underestimate the quiet ones at your peril. Ignore their suffering, dismiss their warnings, and you invite a reckoning born of pain and tempered in silence. The narrative concluded not with triumphant fanfares, but with a lingering question. The vengeance was complete. The old order was gone. Humanity was sovereign, their power absolute. But the galaxy, scarred and fearful, watched them. And they, the humans, stood alone on their pinnacle of power, looking back at the path they had taken, wondering if the cost of remembering was the inability to forget what they had become. The future was uncertain, the peace fragile, and the shadow of Nemesis, the terrible weapon born of their sorrow, loomed large in the galactic psyche. They had reminded the galaxy of Earth's existence. The galaxy would never forget again. But the memory was now tinged with the chilling silence of their power.